The Power of Positive Thinking by Vincent Peale. Chapter 1. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. Have faith in your abilities. Without a humble but reasonable confidence in your own powers, you cannot be successful or happy. But with self-confidence, you can succeed. A sense of inadequacy interferes with the attainment of your hopes, but self-confidence leads to self-realization and achievement. Because of the importance of this mental attitude, this book will help you believe in yourself and release your inner powers. An appalling number of people are made miserable by an inferiority complex. But you need not suffer from this trouble. You can develop faith in yourself. After a convention, a man approached me and asked, "May I talk with you about a matter of desperate importance to me?" We went backstage and sat down. "I'm in town to handle the most important business deal of my life," he explained. "But I don't believe I can put it over. I am discouraged and depressed. In fact," he lamented, "I'm just about sunk. Why is it that all my life I have been tormented by inferiority feelings? I listened to your speech tonight about the power of positive thinking, and I want to ask how I can get some faith in myself." "There are 2 steps," I replied. "First, it is important to discover why you have these feelings. That requires analysis and will take time and may require treatment. But to pull you through this immediate problem, I shall give you a formula. As you walk down the street tonight, repeat certain words I shall give you. Say them over several times before your important appointment. Do this with an attitude of faith, and you will receive ability to deal with this problem. The following is the affirmation I gave him. I can do all things through Christ which strengthens me. Philippians 4:13. Now, follow that prescription, and things will come out all right." He pulled himself up, stood quietly for a moment, then said with considerable feeling, "Okay, doctor. Okay." I watched him square his shoulders and walk out. He seemed a pathetic figure, yet the way he carried himself showed that faith was already at work in his mind. Subsequently, he reported that this simple formula did wonders for him. He added, "It seems incredible that a few words from the Bible could do so much." Of the various causes of inferiority feelings, not a few stem from childhood. My own story is a perfect illustration. As a small boy, I was painfully thin. I had lots of energy, was on a track team, was healthy and hard as nails, but thin. And that bothered me because I didn't want to be thin. I longed to be hard-boiled and tough and fat. I did everything to get fat. I drank cod liver oil, consumed vast numbers of milkshakes, chocolate sundaes, cakes and pies, but they did not affect me in the slightest. I stayed thin and lay awake nights thinking and agonizing about it. I kept on trying to get heavy until I was about 30, when all of a sudden I bulged at the seams. Then I became self-conscious because I was so fat, and finally had to take off 40 pounds with equal agony to get myself down to respectable size. In the second place, practically every member of my family was a public speaker, and that was the last thing I wanted to be. They used to make me speak even when it filled me with terror. I had to use every known device to develop confidence in what powers the good Lord gave me. I found the solution in the simple techniques of faith taught in the Bible. These principles are scientific and can heal any personality of inferiority feelings. Their use can release the powers which have been inhibited by a feeling of inadequacy. Such are some of the sources of the inferiority complex which erect power barriers in our personalities. It is some emotional violence done to us in childhood, or the consequences of certain circumstances, or something we did to ourselves. This malady arises out of the misty past in the dim recesses of our personalities. Perhaps you had an older brother who was a brilliant student. He got A's in school. You made only C's, and you never heard the last of it. So you believed that you could never succeed in life as he could. He got A's and you got C's, so you reasoned that you were consigned to getting C's all your life. Apparently, you never realized that some of those who failed to get high grades in school have been the greatest successes outside of school. Just because somebody gets an A in college doesn't make him the greatest man in the United States, because maybe his A's will stop when he gets his diploma, and the fellow who got C's in school will go on later to get the real A's in life. The greatest secret for eliminating the inferiority complex, which is another term for profound self-doubt, is to fill your mind with faith. Develop tremendous faith in God, and that will give you realistic faith in yourself. The acquiring of dynamic faith is accomplished by prayer, by reading the Bible, and by practicing its faith techniques. Go to a competent spiritual advisor and let him teach you how to have faith. The ability to possess and utilize faith must be studied and practiced to gain perfection. To build up feelings of self-confidence, practice suggesting confidence concepts to your mind. It is possible, even in the midst of your daily work, to drive confident thoughts into consciousness. Let me tell you about one man who did so. While driving me to a lecture engagement, he said, "I used to be filled with insecurities, but I hit upon a wonderful plan which knocked these feelings out of my mind, and now I live with confidence." This was the wonderful plan. He pointed to 2 clips fastened on the instrument panel of the car and, reaching into the glove compartment, took out a pack of cards. He selected one and slipped it beneath the clip. It read, "If ye have faith, nothing shall be impossible unto you." Matthew 17:20. He removed that one, selected another, and placed it under the clip. This one read, "If God be for us, who can be against us?" Romans 8:31. "I'm a traveling salesman," he explained, "and I used to drive around between calls thinking fear and defeat thoughts. That is one reason my sales were down. But since I have been using these cards and committing the words to memory, the insecurities that used to haunt me are just about gone. Instead of thinking thoughts of defeat and ineffectiveness, I think thoughts of faith and courage. It is wonderful the way this method has changed me. It has helped in my business too." This man's plan is a wise one. By filling his mind with affirmations of God, he had put an end to his sense of insecurity. His potential powers were set free. Lack of self-confidence apparently is one of the great problems besetting people today. In a university, a survey was made of 600 students in psychology courses. The students were asked to state their most difficult personal problem. 75% listed lack of confidence. It can safely be assumed that the same large proportion is true of the population generally. Everywhere you encounter people who are inwardly afraid, who shrink from life, who suffer from a deep sense of inadequacy and insecurity, who doubt their own powers. Deep within themselves, they mistrust their ability to meet responsibilities or to grasp opportunities. Always they are beset by the vague and sinister fear that something is not going to be quite right. They do not believe that they have it in them to be what they want to be, and so they try to make themselves content with something less than that of which they are capable. Thousands upon thousands go crawling through life on their hands and knees, defeated and afraid. And in most cases, such frustration of power is unnecessary. The blows of life, the accumulation of difficulties, the multiplication of problems tend to sap energy and leave you spent and discouraged. In such a condition, the true status of your power is often obscured, and a person yields to a discouragement that is not justified by the facts. It is vitally essential to reappraise your personality assets. Dr. Carl Menninger, the famous psychiatrist, once said, "Attitudes are more important than facts." That is worth repeating until its truth grips you. Any fact facing us, even the most hopeless, is not as important as our attitude toward that fact. You may permit a fact to overwhelm you mentally before you start to deal with it. On the other hand, a confident thought pattern can modify or overcome the fact. So, if you feel that you are defeated and have lost confidence in your ability to win, sit down, take a piece of paper and make a list, not of the factors that are against you, but of those that are for you. If you or I think constantly of the forces that seem to be against us, they will assume a formidable strength they do not possess. But if you mentally visualize and affirm and reaffirm your assets, you will rise out of any difficulty. Your inner powers will reassert themselves and, with the help of God, lift you to victory. A sure cure for lack of confidence is the thought that God is actually with you and helping you. This is one of the simplest teachings in religion, namely, that Almighty God will see you through. No other idea is so powerful in developing self-confidence as this simple belief when practiced. To practice it, simply affirm, God is with me. God is helping me. God is guiding me. Spend several minutes each day visualizing His presence. Then practice believing that affirmation. Go about your business on the assumption that what you have affirmed and visualized is true. Affirm it, visualize it, believe it, and it will actualize itself. The release of power which this procedure stimulates will astonish you. Chapter 2. A peaceful mind generates power. At breakfast in a hotel dining room, one man complained of a sleepless night. He had tossed and turned and was about as exhausted as when he retired. "Guess I'd better stop watching the news before going to bed," he observed. "I tuned in last night and got an air full of trouble." Another man spoke up. "I had a grand night. Of course, I used my go-to-sleep plan, which never fails to work." I prodded him for his plan, which he explained as follows. "When I was a boy, my father, a farmer, had the habit of gathering the family in the parlor at bedtime, and he read to us out of the Bible. After prayers, I would go up to my room and sleep like a top. But when I left home, I got away from the Bible reading and prayer habit. For years, practically, the only time I ever prayed was when I got into a jam. But some months ago, my wife and I, having difficult problems, decided we would try it again. We found it a helpful practice, so now every night before going to bed, she and I together read the Bible and pray. I don't know what there is about it, but I have been sleeping better and things have improved. In fact, even on the road, as I am now, I still read the Bible and pray. Last night I read the 23rd Psalm out loud." He turned to the other man and said, "I didn't go to bed with an air full of trouble. I went to sleep with a mind full of peace." Well, there are two cryptic phrases for you: an air full of trouble and a mind full of peace. Which do you choose? The essence of the secret lies in a change of mental attitude. One must learn to live on a different thought basis, and even though thought change requires effort, it is much easier than to continue living as you are. The life of strain is difficult. The life of inner peace, being harmonious and without stress, is the easiest type of existence. The chief struggle then in gaining mental peace is the effort of revamping your thinking to the relaxed attitude of acceptance of God's gift of peace. As a physician said, "Many of my patients have nothing wrong with them except their thoughts." So I have a favorite prescription I write for some. It is a verse from the Bible, Romans 12:2. I do not write out that verse for my patients. I make them look it up. The verse reads, "Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind." To be happier and healthier, they need a renewing of their minds, that is, a change in their thoughts. When they take this prescription, they actually achieve a mind full of peace. That helps to produce health and well-being. A primary method for gaining a mind full of peace is to practice emptying the mind. At least twice a day, empty your mind of fears, hates, insecurities, regrets, and guilt feelings. To prevent unhappy thoughts from sneaking in again, immediately fill your mind with creative and healthy thoughts. At intervals during the day, practice thinking a carefully selected series of peaceful thoughts. Let mental pictures of the most peaceful scenes you have ever witnessed pass across your mind, as for example, the silvery light of the moon falling upon rippling waters, or the sea washing gently upon soft shores of sand. Such peaceful thought images will work upon your mind as a healing medicine. Repeat audibly some peaceful words. Words have profound suggestive power, and there is healing in the very saying of them. Use a word such as serenity. Picture serenity as you say it. Repeat it slowly and in the mood of which the word is a symbol. It is also helpful to use lines from poetry or passages from the scriptures. A man of my acquaintance who achieved a remarkable peace of mind has the habit of writing on cards unusual quotations expressing peacefulness. He carries one of the cards in his wallet at all times, referring to it frequently until each quotation is committed to memory. He says that each such idea dropped into the subconscious lubricates his mind with peace. One of the quotations he used is from a 16th century mystic. "Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. Everything passes away except God. God alone is sufficient." There are other practical ways by which you can develop serenity and quiet attitudes. One way is through your conversation. In a group, when the conversation takes a trend that is upsetting, try injecting peaceful ideas into the talk. To have peace of mind, fill your personal and group conversations with positive, happy, optimistic, satisfying expressions. Another effective technique in developing a peaceful mind is the daily practice of silence. Insist upon not less than a quarter of an hour of absolute quiet every 24 hours. Go alone into the quietest place available to you and sit or lie down for 15 minutes and practice the art of silence. Do not write or read. Think as little as possible. Throw your mind into neutral. Conceive of your mind as the surface of a body of water and see how nearly quiet you can make it, so that there is not a ripple. When you have attained a quiescent state, listen for the deeper sounds of harmony and beauty and of God that are to be found in the essence of silence. Saturate your thoughts with peaceful experiences, peaceful words and ideas, and ultimately you will have a storehouse of peace-producing experiences to which you may turn for refreshment and renewal of your spirit. It will be a vast source of power. Chapter 3. How to have constant energy. How we think we feel has a definite effect on how we actually feel physically. If your mind tells you that you are tired, the body mechanism, the nerves and the muscles accept the fact. If your mind is intensely interested, you can keep on at an activity indefinitely. Religion functions through our thoughts. In fact, it is a system of thought discipline. By supplying attitudes of faith to the mind, it can increase energy. It helps you to accomplish prodigious activity by suggesting that you have ample support and resources of power. A friend in Connecticut, an energetic man, full of vitality and vigor, says that he goes to church regularly to get his batteries recharged. His concept is sound. God is the source of all energy in the universe: atomic energy, electrical energy, and spiritual energy. Contact with God establishes within us a flow of the same type of energy that recreates the world and that renews springtime every year. When we are in spiritual contact with God, the divine energy flows through the personality, automatically renewing the original creative act. The principles of Christianity, scientifically utilized, can develop a continuous flow of energy into the human mind and body. Every great personality I have ever known who has demonstrated the capacity for prodigious work has been a person in tune with the infinite. Every such person seems in harmony with nature. They have not necessarily been pious, but invariably they have been extraordinarily well organized emotionally and psychologically. It is fear, resentment, the projection of parental faults upon people when they are children, inner conflicts and obsessions that throw off balance the finely tuned nature, thus causing undue expenditure of natural force. I am convinced that neither age nor circumstance needs to deprive us of energy and vitality. All through its pages, the Bible talks about vitality and force and life. The supreme overall word of the Bible is life, and life means vitality, to be filled with energy. This does not rule out pain or suffering or difficulty, but the clear implication is that if a person practices the creative and recreative principles of Christianity, he can live with power and energy. The practice of Christian principles will bring a person into the proper tempo of living. Our energies are destroyed because of the abnormal pace at which we go. The conservation of energy depends upon getting your personality speed synchronized with the rate of God's movement. God is in you. If you are going at one rate and God at another, you are tearing yourself apart. When we become attuned to God's rhythm, we can develop a normal tempo within ourselves and energy flows freely. To get into the time synchronization of Almighty God, go out some warm day and lie down on the earth. Get your ear close down to the ground and listen. You will hear the sound of the wind in the trees and the murmur of insects, and you will discover that there is in all these sounds a well-regulated tempo. You cannot get that tempo by listening to traffic in the city streets, for it is lost in the confusion of sound. You can get it in church, where you hear the word of God and the great hymns. Truth vibrates to God's tempo in a church. To avoid tiredness and to have energy, feel your way into the essential rhythm of Almighty God and all His works. To accomplish this, relax physically. Then conceive of your mind as likewise relaxing. Follow this mentally by visualizing the soul as becoming quiescent. Then pray as follows. Dear God, You are the source of all energy. You are the source of the energy in the sun, in the atom, in all flesh, in the bloodstream, in the mind. I hereby draw energy from You as from an illimitable source. Then practice believing that you receive energy. Keep in tune with the infinite. To live with constant energy, it is also important to get your emotional faults corrected. You will never have full energy until you do. Newt Rockne, one of the greatest football coaches this country ever produced, said that a football player cannot have sufficient energy unless his emotions are under spiritual control. In fact, he went so far as to say that he would not have a man on his team who did not have a genuinely friendly feeling for every fellow player. I have to get the most energy out of a man, he said, and have discovered that it cannot be done if he hates another man. Hate blocks his energy and he isn't up to par until he eliminates it and develops a friendly feeling. People who lack energy are disorganized by their deep, fundamental emotional and psychological conflicts, such as guilt and fear. But healing is ever possible. The surest way not to become tired is to lose yourself in something in which you have a profound conviction. A famous statesman who made 7 speeches in one day was still boundless in energy. Why are you not tired after making 7 speeches? I asked. Because, he said, I believe absolutely in everything I said in those speeches. I am enthusiastic about my convictions. That's the secret. He was on fire for something. He was pouring himself out, and you never lose energy and vitality in so doing. You only lose energy when life becomes dull in your mind. Your mind gets bored and therefore tired doing nothing. You don't have to be tired. Get interested in something. Get absolutely enthralled in something. Throw yourself into it with abandon. Get out of yourself. Be somebody. Do something. Don't sit around moaning about things, reading the papers and saying, "Why don't they do something?" The man who is out doing something isn't tired. If you're not getting into good causes, no wonder you're tired. You're disintegrating. You're dying on the vine. The more you lose yourself in something bigger than yourself, the more energy you will have. Chapter 4. Try prayer power. You are dealing with the most tremendous power in the world when you pray. The secret of prayer is to find the process that will most effectively open your mind humbly to God. Any method through which you can stimulate the power of God to flow into your mind is legitimate. An illustration of a scientific use of prayer is the experience of a man who opened a small business. As he characterized it, a little hole in the wall in New York City. Years ago, he had 1 employee. In a few years, they moved into a larger room and then into extensive quarters. It became a very successful operation. This man's method of business, as he described it, was to fill the little hole in the wall with optimistic prayers and thoughts. He declared that hard work, positive thinking, fair dealing, right treatment of people, and the proper kind of praying always get results. This man worked out his own simple formula for solving his problems through prayer power. The formula is prayerize, picturize, actualize. By prayerize, my friend meant a daily system of creative prayer. When a problem arose, he talked it over with God simply and directly in prayer. Moreover, he conceived of God as being with him in his office, in his home, on the street, in his automobile, always nearby as a partner. He took seriously the biblical injunction to pray without ceasing. He interpreted it as meaning that he should go about every day discussing with God in a natural, normal manner the questions that had to be dealt with. He did not often kneel to offer his prayers, but would, for example, say to God, "What will I do about this, Lord?" Or "Give me a fresh insight on this, Lord." The second point in his formula of creative prayer is to picturize. The basic factor in physics is force. The basic factor in psychology is the realizable wish. When either failure or success is picturized, it strongly tends to actualize in terms equivalent to the mental image pictured. To assure something worthwhile happening, first pray about it and test it according to God's will. Then print a picture of it on your mind as happening, holding the picture firmly in consciousness. Continue to surrender the picture to God's will. That is to say, put the matter in God's hands and follow God's guidance. Work hard and intelligently, thus doing your part to achieve success. Practice believing and continue to hold the picture in your thoughts. Do this and you will be astonished at the strange ways in which the picture comes to pass. In this manner, the picture actualizes. That which you have prayerized and picturized actualizes according to the pattern of your basic realizable wish when conditioned by invoking God's power upon it, and if, moreover, you give fully of yourself to its realization. I have practiced this prayer method and find great power in it. Others have likewise reported that it released creative power into their experience. For example, a woman discovered that her husband was drifting from her. Theirs had been a happy marriage, but the wife had become preoccupied in social affairs and the husband had gotten busy in his work. Before they knew it, the close, old-time companionship was lost. One day she discovered his interest in another woman. She became hysterical. She consulted her minister, who instructed her how to pray and to picturize. He also advised her to hold a mental image of the restoration of the old-time companionship, to visualize the goodness in her husband, and to picture a restored harmony between the two of them. She was to hold this picture with faith. About this time, her husband informed her that he wanted a divorce. She had conquered hysteria and calmly replied that she was willing if he wanted it, but suggested a deferral of the decision. If at the end of 90 days you still want a divorce, I will cooperate. He gave her a quizzical look, for he had expected an outburst. Night after night he went out, and night after night she sat at home, but she pictured him in his old chair. She even pictured him drying the dishes as he did when they were first married. She visualized the two of them playing golf together as they once had. She maintained this picture with steady faith, and one night there he actually sat in his chair. Occasionally he would be gone, but more and more nights he sat in his chair. Then one Saturday afternoon he asked, "What do you say to a game of golf?" The days went by pleasantly until she realized that the 90th day had arrived. So that evening she said quietly, "Bill, this is the 90th day." "What do you mean?" he asked, puzzled. "The 90th day? Why, don't you remember? We agreed to wait 90 days to settle that divorce matter, and this is the day." He looked at her for a moment, then hidden behind his paper turned a page, saying, "Don't be silly. I couldn't possibly get along without you. Where did you ever get the idea I was going to leave you?" I have known many other people who have successfully applied this technique. When sincerely and intelligently brought into situations, this has produced such excellent results that it must be regarded as an extraordinarily efficient method of prayer. People who take this method seriously and actually use it get astonishing results. Chapter 5. How to create your own happiness. Who decides whether you shall be happy or unhappy? You do. A television celebrity had as a guest on his program an aged man, and he was a rare old man indeed. His remarks were entirely unpremeditated. They simply bubbled up out of a personality that was radiant and happy. And whenever he said anything, it was so naive, so apt, that the audience roared with laughter. They loved him. Impressed, the celebrity enjoyed the situation with the others. Finally, he asked the old man why he was so happy. "You must have a wonderful secret of happiness," he suggested. "No," replied the old man. "I haven't any great secret. It's just as plain as the nose on your face. When I get up in the morning, I have two choices: to be happy or unhappy. I just choose to be happy." It may appear that the old man's remark was superficial, but I recall that Abraham Lincoln, whom nobody could accuse of being superficial, said that people are just about as happy as they make up their minds to be. You can be unhappy if you want to be. It is the easiest thing in the world to accomplish. Just choose unhappiness. Go around telling yourself that things aren't going well, that nothing is satisfactory, and you can be quite sure of being unhappy. But say to yourself, things are going nicely. Life is good. I choose happiness, and you can be quite certain of having your choice. To become a happy person, have a clean soul, eyes that see romance in the commonplace, a child's heart and spiritual simplicity. Many of us manufacture our own unhappiness. Of course, not all unhappiness is self-created, for social conditions are responsible for not a few of our woes. Yet, to a large extent, by our thoughts and attitudes, we distill out of the ingredients of life either happiness or unhappiness for ourselves. Anyone who desires it, who wills it, and who learns and applies the right formula may become a happy person. If happiness is determined by our thoughts, it is necessary to drive off the thoughts which make for depression and discouragement. This can be done first by simply determining to do it, and second by utilizing an easily employed technique which I suggested to a businessman. This man's principal trouble was in his depressed thought pattern. He needed an infusion of light and faith. So rather boldly I said, if you want to feel better and stop being miserable, I can give you something that will fix you up. What can you do? He snorted. Are you a miracle worker? No, I replied. But I can put you in touch with a miracle worker who will drain off that unhappiness of yours and give you a new slant on life. I mean that, I concluded as we separated. Apparently, this businessman became curious, for he got in touch with me later, and I gave him a little book of mine called Thought Conditioners. It contains 40 health and happiness-producing thoughts. Inasmuch as it is a pocket-sized booklet, I suggested that he carry it for easy consultation and that he drop one of the suggested thoughts in his mind every day for 40 days. I further suggested that he commit each thought to memory, and that he visualize this healthy thought sending a quieting and healing influence through his mind. I assured him that if he would follow this plan, these healthy thoughts would drive off the diseased thoughts that were sapping his joy, energy, and creative ability. He had his doubts, but he followed my directions. After about 3 weeks, he called me on the telephone and shouted, "Boy, this sure works. It is wonderful. I have snapped out of it, and I wouldn't have believed it possible." Tomorrow when you arise, say out loud 3 times this one sentence. This is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Psalm 118:24. Only personalize it and say, I will rejoice and be glad in it. Repeat it in a strong, clear voice and with positive tone and emphasis. While dressing or getting breakfast, say aloud a few such remarks as, I believe I can successfully handle all problems that will arise today. I feel good physically, mentally, and emotionally. It is wonderful to be alive. I am grateful for all that I have had, for all that I now have, and for all that I shall have. Things aren't going to fall apart. God is here, and He is with me, and He will see me through. I thank God for every good thing. Throughout the day, base your actions and attitudes upon fundamental principles of happy living. One of the most simple and basic of such principles is that of human love and goodwill. It is amazing what happiness a sincere expression of compassion and tenderness will induce. A genuinely happy man is a friend of mine, H.C. Matten, who, with his equally happy wife, Mary, travels throughout the country. Mr. Matten carries a unique business card on the reverse side of which is stated the philosophy that has rebrought happiness to him and his wife and to hundreds of others who have been so fortunate as to feel the impact of their personalities. The card reads, The way to happiness. Keep your heart free from hate, your mind from worry. Live simply, expect little, give much. Fill your life with love. Scatter sunshine. Forget self, think of others. Do as you would be done by. Try this for a week, and you will be surprised. As you read these words you may say, there is nothing new in that. Indeed, there is something new in it if you have never tried it. When you start to practice it, you will find it the most astonishing method of happy and successful living you have ever used. What is the value of having known these principles all your life if you have never made use of them? Such inefficiency in living is tragic. For a man to have lived in poverty when all the time right on his doorstep is gold indicates an unintelligent approach to life. Of course, in order to give power to these principles of happiness and make them work, it is necessary to support them with a dynamic quality of mind. You are not likely to secure effective results even with spiritual principles without spiritual power. When one experiences a dynamic spiritual change inwardly, success with happiness-producing ideas becomes extraordinarily easy. If you begin to use spiritual principles, however awkwardly, you will gradually experience spiritual power inwardly. This will give you the greatest surge of happiness you have ever known. It will stay with you too, as long as you live a God-centered life. Chapter 6. Expect the best and get it. William James, the famous psychologist, said, "Our belief at the beginning of a doubtful undertaking is the one thing that ensures the successful outcome of your venture." When you expect the best, you release a magnetic force in your mind which by a law of attraction tends to bring the best to you. This does not mean that by believing you aren't necessarily going to get everything you want or think you want. Perhaps that would not be good for you. When you put your trust in God, He guides your mind so that you do not want things that are not good for you. But it does mean that when you learn to believe, that which has seemingly been impossible moves into the area of the possible. Every great thing becomes for you a possibility. A famous trapeze artist was instructing his students how to perform on the high trapeze bar. Finally, having given full explanations in this skill, he told them to demonstrate their ability. One student, looking up at the insecure perch upon which he must perform, was suddenly filled with fear. He froze completely. He had a terrifying vision of himself falling to the ground. He couldn't move a muscle, so deep was his fright. "I can't do it," he gasped. The instructor put his arm around the boy's shoulder and said, "Son, you can do it, and I will tell you how." Then he made one of the wisest remarks I have ever heard. He said, "Throw your heart over the bar and your body will follow." Copy that sentence. Write it on a card and put it in your pocket. Better still, write it on your mind. You who really want to do something with life. It's packed with power, that sentence. Throw your heart over the bar and your body will follow. Heart is the symbol of creative activity. Fire the heart with where you want to go and what you want to be. Get it so deeply fixed in your subconscious that you will not take no for an answer. Then your entire personality will follow where your heart leads. Throw your heart over the bar means to throw the spiritual essence of you over the bar, and your material self will follow in the victory groove thus pioneered by your faith-inspired mind. Expect the best, not the worst, and you will attain your heart's desire. Whenever you have a bar, that is to say a barrier, in front of you, stop, close your eyes, visualize everything that is above the bar and nothing that is below it. Then imaginatively throw your heart over that bar and see yourself as being given lifting power to rise above it. Believe that you are experiencing this upthrust of force. You will be amazed at the lifting force you will receive. You can overcome any obstacle. You can achieve the most tremendous things by faith power. And how do you develop faith power? Saturate your mind with the great words of the Bible. If you will spend 1 hour a day reading the Bible and committing its great passages to memory, allowing them to recondition your personality, the change in you and in your experience will be little short of miraculous. Read the New Testament. Select a dozen of the strong statements about faith and memorize each one. Say them over and over, especially just before going to sleep. In time, they will modify your thought pattern. This process will change you into a believer, into an expector, and thus you will become an achiever. You will have new power to get what God and you decide you really want from life. This is not some theory that I have thought up. It is taught by the most reliable book known to man. Generation after generation, no matter what develops in the way of knowledge and science, the Bible is read by more people than any other book. Humanity rightly has more confidence in it than any other document ever written, and the Bible tells us that faith power works wonders. The most powerful force in human nature is the spiritual power technique taught in the Bible. Very astutely, the Bible emphasizes the method by which a person can make something of himself. Belief, positive thinking, faith in God, faith in other people, faith in yourself, faith in life. This is the essence of the technique it teaches. If thou canst believe, it says, all things are possible to him that believeth. Mark 9:23. If ye have faith, nothing shall be impossible unto you. Matthew 17:20. According to your faith be it unto you. Matthew 9:29. Believe, believe. So it drives home the truth that faith moves mountains. A woman, compelled by adversity to go into sales work, undertook to demonstrate vacuum cleaners from house to house. She took a negative attitude toward herself and her work. She knew she was going to fail. She feared to approach a house even though she came for a requested demonstration. She believed that she could not make the sale. As a result, she failed in a high percentage of her interviews. One day she called upon a woman who evidenced consideration beyond the average. To this customer, the saleswoman poured out her tale of defeat and powerlessness. The other woman listened patiently, then said quietly, "If you expect failure, you will get failure, but if you expect to succeed, I am sure you will succeed." And she added, "I will give you a formula which I believe will restyle your thinking, give you new confidence and help you to accomplish your goals. Repeat this formula before every call. Believe in it and then marvel at what it will do for you. This is it. If God be for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31. But change it by personalizing it so that you say, if God be for me, who can be against me? God realizes that you want security and support for your little children and yourself, and by practicing the method I suggest you will be given power to get what you want. She learned to approach each house expecting to make a sale, affirming and picturizing positive, not negative, results. As the saleswoman employed this principle, she acquired new courage, new faith, and deeper confidence in her own ability. Now she declares, God helps me sell vacuum cleaners, and who can dispute it? It is a well-defined and authentic principle that what the mind profoundly expects it tends to receive. Perhaps this is true because what you really expect is what you actually want. Unless you really want something sufficiently to create an atmosphere of positive factors by your dynamic desire, it is likely to elude you. If with all your heart, that is the secret. If with all your heart, that is to say, if with the full complement of your personality, you reach out creatively toward your heart's desire, your reach will not be in vain. At least 10 times every day affirm, I expect the best and with God's help will attain the best. In so doing, your thoughts will turn toward the best and become conditioned to its realization. This practice will bring all of your powers to focus upon the attainment of the best. It will bring the best to you. Chapter 7. I don't believe in defeat. There is no difficulty you cannot overcome. A wise and philosophical man once said to me, when asked how he overcame his difficulties, "How do I get through a trouble?" Well, first I try to go around it, and if I can't go around it, I try to get under it, and if I can't get under it, I try to go over it, and if I can't get over it, I just plow right through it. Then he added, God and I plow right through it. An effective method for making your mind positive in character is to eliminate certain expressions of thought and speech, which we may call the little negatives. These negatives clutter up the average person's conversation, and while each one is seemingly unimportant in itself, the total effect is to condition the mind negatively. When this thought of little negatives first occurred to me, I began to analyze my own conversational habits and was shocked by what I found. I was making such statements as, I'm afraid I'll be late, or I wonder if I'll have a flat tire, or I don't think I can do that. These are little negatives, to be sure, and a big thought is of course more powerful than a little one. But it must never be forgotten that mighty oaks from little acorns grow, and if many little negatives clutter up your conversation, they are bound to seep into your mind. It is surprising how they accumulate in force, and before you know it, they will grow into big negatives. So I determined to root those little negatives out of my conversation. I found that the best way to eliminate them was deliberately to say a positive word about everything. When you keep asserting that things are going to work out well, good results do occur. On a roadside billboard, I saw an advertisement of a certain brand of motor oil. The slogan read, "A clean engine always delivers power. So will a mind free of negatives. Therefore, flush out your thoughts, give yourself a clean mental engine, remembering that a clean mind, even as a clean engine, always delivers power." So to overcome your obstacles and live the "I don't believe in defeat" philosophy, cultivate a positive idea pattern. What we do with obstacles is directly determined by our mental attitude. Most of our obstacles are mental in character. You may object, mine are not mental. Mine are real. Perhaps so, but your attitude toward them is mental. What you think about your obstacles largely determines what you do about them. Form the mental attitude that you cannot remove an obstacle and you will not remove it. But when your mind becomes convinced that you can do something about difficulties, astonishing results will begin to happen. All of a sudden you discover that you have the power you would never acknowledge. I played golf with a man who was not only an excellent golfer but a philosopher as well. As we went around the golf course, the game itself drew out of him a gem of wisdom for which I shall ever be grateful. I hit a ball into some high grass. When we came up to my ball, I said in some dismay, "Now just look at that. I certainly am in the rough. I have a bad lie. It is going to be tough getting out of here." My friend grinned and said, "Didn't I read something in your books about positive thinking?" Sheepishly I acknowledged that such was the case. "I wouldn't think negatively about that lie of yours," he said. "Do you think you could get a good hit if this ball were lying out on the fairway on the short grass?" I said I thought so. "Well," he continued, "why do you think you could do better out there than here?" "Because," I replied, "the grass is cut short on the fairway and the ball can get away better." Then he did a curious thing. "Let's get down on our hands and knees," he suggested, "and see just how this ball does lie." So we got down on our hands and knees, and he said, "Observe that the relative height of the ball here is about the same as it would be on the fairway, the only difference being that you have about 6 inches of grass above the ball." Then he did an even more whimsical thing. "Notice the quality and character of this grass," he said. He pulled off a blade and handed it to me. "Chew it," he said. I chewed, and he asked, "Isn't that tender?" "Why, yes," I replied. "Well," he continued, "an easy swing of your number 5 iron will cut through that grass almost like a knife." And then he gave me this sentence, which I am going to remember as long as I live, and I hope you will also. "The rough is only mental." In other words, he continued, it is rough because you think it is. In your mind you have decided that here is an obstacle which will cause you difficulty. The power to overcome this obstacle is in your mind. If you visualize yourself lifting the ball out of the rough, believing you can do it, your mind will transfer flexibility, rhythm and power to your muscles, and you will handle that club in such a manner that the ball will rise right out of there in a beautiful shot. All you need to do is to keep your eye on that ball and tell yourself that you are going to lift it out of that grass with a lovely stroke. Let the stiffness and tension go out of you. Hit it with exhilaration and power. Remember, the rough is only mental. To this day, I remember the thrill, the sense of power and delight I had in the clean shot that dropped the ball to the edge of the green. That is a great fact to remember in connection with difficult problems. The rough is only mental. Believe that Almighty God has put in you the power to lift yourself out of the rough by keeping your eye firmly fixed on the source of your power. Affirm to yourself that through this power you can do anything you have to do. Believe that this power is taking the tension out of you, that this power is flowing through you. Believe this, and a sense of victory will come. Chapter 8. How to break the worry habit. You do not need to be a victim of worry. Reduced to its simplest form, what is worry? It is simply an unhealthy and destructive mental habit. You are not born with a worry habit. you acquired it. And because you can change any habit and any acquired attitude, you can cast worry from your mind. To eliminate abnormal worry, empty the mind daily. This should be done preferably before retiring at night to avoid the retention by the consciousness of worries while you sleep. During sleep, thoughts tend to sink more deeply into the subconscious. The last 5 minutes before going to sleep are of extraordinary importance, for in that brief period the mind is most receptive to suggestion. It tends to absorb the last ideas that are entertained in waking consciousness. This process of mind drainage is important in overcoming worry, for fear thoughts, unless drained off, can clog the mind and impede the flow of mental and spiritual power. But such thoughts can be emptied from the mind and will not accumulate if they are eliminated daily. To drain them, utilize a process of creative imagination. Conceive of yourself as actually emptying your mind of all anxiety and fear. Picture all worry thoughts as flowing out as you would let water flow from a basin by removing the stopper. Repeat the following affirmation during this visualization. With God's help, I am now emptying my mind of all anxiety, all fear, all sense of insecurity. Repeat this slowly 5 times, then add, I believe that my mind is now emptied of all anxiety, all fear, all sense of insecurity. Repeat that statement 5 times, meanwhile holding a mental picture of your mind as being emptied of these concepts. Then thank God for thus freeing you from fear. And go to sleep. In starting the curative process, the foregoing method should be utilized in mid-morning and mid-afternoon, as well as at bedtime. Go into some quiet place for 5 minutes for this purpose. Faithfully perform this process and you will soon note beneficial results. Upon emptying the mind, practice refilling it. Fill it with thoughts of faith, hope, courage, expectancy. Say aloud such affirmations as, God is now filling my mind with courage, with peace, with calm assurance. God is now protecting me from all harm. God is now protecting my loved ones from all harm. God is now guiding me to right decisions. God will see me through this situation. A half-dozen times each day crowd your mind with such thoughts as these until the mind is overflowing with them. In due course, these thoughts of faith will crowd out worry. Fear is the most powerful of all thoughts with one exception, and that one exception is faith. Faith can always overcome fear. Faith is the one power against which fear cannot stand. Day by day, as you fill your mind with faith, there will ultimately be no room left for fear. This is the one great fact that no one should forget. Master faith, and you will automatically master fear. So the process is, empty the mind and cauterize it with God's grace. Then practice filling your mind with faith, and you will break the worry habit. One of the best illustrations of this strategy against worry was a scheme developed by a businessman. He was a tremendous worrier. In fact, he was fast getting himself into a bad state of nerves and ill health. His particular form of worry was that he was always doubtful as to whether he had done or said the right thing. He was always rehashing his decisions and getting himself unnerved about them. Finally, he broke his worry habit by working out a little ritual that he performed every night before leaving his office. He reached up and tore off the calendar page for that particular day, rolled it into a ball and dropped that day into the wastebasket. Then he prayed, Lord, you gave me this day. I did the best I could with it and you helped me. And I thank you. I made some mistakes. That was when I didn't follow your advice, and I am sorry about that. Forgive me. But I had some successes too, and I am grateful for your guidance. But now, Lord, mistakes or successes, the day is over and I'm through with it, so I'm giving it back to you. Amen. Perhaps that isn't an orthodox prayer, but it proved to be an effective one. He dramatized the finishing of the day and he set his face to the future, expecting to do better the next day. By this method, this man's sins of omission and commission gradually lost their hold on him. He was released from the worries that accumulated from his yesterdays. In this technique, this man was practicing one of the most effective anti-worry formulas, which is described in these words. But this one thing I do, Forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. Philippians 3:13-14. To break the worry habit, try this worry-breaking formula. 1. Say to yourself, worry is just a very bad mental habit, and I can change any habit with God's help. 2. First thing every morning before you arise, say out loud, I believe, 3 times. 3. Pray, using this formula. I place this day, my life, my loved ones, my work in the Lord's hands. Whatever happens, whatever results, if I am in the Lord's hands, it is the Lord's will and it is good. 4. Practice saying something positive concerning everything about which you have been talking negatively. Don't say, I'll never be able to do that. Instead, affirm, with God's help I will do that. 5. Never participate in a worry conversation. 6. Mark every passage in the Bible that speaks of faith, hope, happiness, glory, radiance. Commit each to memory. Say them over and over again until these creative thoughts saturate your subconscious mind. Then the subconscious will return to you what you have given it, namely, optimism, not worry. 7. Cultivate friendships with hopeful people. Surround yourself with friends who think positive, faith-producing thoughts and who contribute to a creative atmosphere. This will keep you re-stimulated with faith attitudes. 8. See how many people you can help to cure their own worry habit. In helping another to overcome worry, you get greater power over it within yourself. 9. Every day of your life, conceive of yourself as living in partnership and companionship with Jesus Christ. If He actually walked by your side, would you be worried or afraid? Well then, say to yourself, He is with me. Affirm aloud His promise, I am with you always. Then change it to say, He is with me now. Repeat the affirmation 3 times every day. Chapter 9. Power to solve personal problems. One of the most effective techniques in problem solving is the simple device of conceiving of God as a partner. One of the basic truths taught by the Bible is that God is with us. In fact, Christianity begins with that concept. For when Jesus Christ was born, He was called Emmanuel, meaning God with us. Christianity teaches that in all the difficulties, problems, and circumstances of this life, God is close by. We can talk to Him, lean upon Him, get help from Him, and have the inestimable benefit of His interest, support, and help. Practically everybody believes in a general way that this is true, and many have experienced the reality of this faith. In getting correct solutions to your problems, however, it is necessary to go a step further than believing this, for one must actually practice the idea of presence. Practice believing that God is as real as your spouse, or your business partner, or your closest friend. Practice talking matters over with Him. Believe that He hears and gives thought to your problems. Assume that He impresses upon your mind the ideas and insights necessary to solve your problems. Definitely believe that in these solutions there will be no error, but that you will be guided to actions according to truth, which results in right outcomes. A businessman stopped me one day following a Rotary Club meeting in a western city at which I had made a speech. He told me that something he had read in one of my newspaper columns had, as he put it, completely revolutionized his attitude and saved his business. Naturally, I was interested and pleased that any little thing I had said would bring about such a splendid result. I had been having quite a difficult time in my business, he said. In fact, it was beginning to be a serious question as to whether I could save my business. A series of unfortunate circumstances together with market conditions, regulatory procedures, and the economy affected my line profoundly. I read this article of yours in which you advance the idea of taking God in as a partner. I think you used the phrase, effect a merger with God. When I first read that, it seemed to me a rather cracked brain idea. How could a man on earth, a human being, take God as a partner? Besides, I had always thought of God as a vast being, so much bigger than man that I was like an insect in His sight, and yet you were saying that I should take Him as a partner. The idea seemed preposterous. Then a friend gave me one of your books, and I found similar ideas scattered all through it. You told actual life stories about people who followed this advice. They all seemed to be sensible people, but still I was unconvinced. I always had the idea that ministers are idealistic theorists, that they know nothing about business and practical affairs. So I sort of wrote you off, he said with a smile. However, a funny thing happened one day. I went to my office so depressed that I actually thought perhaps the best thing for me to do would be to blow my brains out and get away from all these problems which seemed completely to floor me. Then into my mind came this idea of taking God as a partner. I shut the door, sat in my chair, and put my head on my arms on the desk. I hadn't prayed more than a dozen times in as many years. However, I certainly did pray on this occasion. I told the Lord that I had heard this idea about taking him in as a partner, that I wasn't actually sure what it meant or how one did it. I told him that I was baffled, bewildered, and discouraged. I said, Lord, I can't offer you much in the way of a partnership, but please join with me and help me. I don't know how you can help me, but I want to be helped. So I now put my business, myself, my family, and my future in your hands. Whatever you say goes. I don't even know how you are going to tell me what to do, but I am ready to hear and will follow your advice if you will make it clear. Well, he continued, that was the prayer. After I finished praying, I sat at my desk. I guess I expected something miraculous to happen, but nothing did. However, I did suddenly feel quiet and rested. I actually had a feeling of peacefulness. Nothing out of the ordinary occurred that day or that night. But the next day when I went to my office, I had a brighter and happier feeling than usual. I began to feel confident that things would turn out right. It was hard to explain why I felt that way. Nothing was any different. In fact, you might even say things were a shade worse, but I was different. This feeling of peacefulness stayed with me and I began to feel better. I kept praying each day and talked to God as I would to a partner. They were not churchy prayers, just plain man-to-man talk. Then one day in my office, all of a sudden an idea popped up in my mind. It was like toast popping up in a toaster. I said to myself, well, what do you know about that? For it was something that had never occurred to me, but I knew instantly that it was just the method to follow. Why I had never thought of it before, I haven't the slightest idea. My mind was too tied up, I guess. I hadn't been functioning mentally. I immediately followed the hunch. Then he stopped. No, it was no hunch. It was my partner, talking to me. I immediately put this idea into operation and things began to roll. New ideas began to flow out of my mind. And despite conditions, I began to get the business back on an even keel. Now the general situation has improved considerably and I'm out of the woods. Then he said, I don't know anything about preaching or about writing books, but let me tell you this. Whenever you get a chance to talk to businessmen, tell them that if they will take God as a partner in their business, they will get more good ideas than they can ever use, and they can turn those ideas into assets. I don't merely mean money. He said, although a way to get a good return on your investment, I believe, is to get God-guided ideas. But tell them that the God partnership method is the way to get their problem solved right. This incident is just one of many similar demonstrations of the law of a divine human relationship working itself out in practical affairs. I cannot emphasize too strongly the effectiveness of this technique of problem solving. It has produced amazing results in many cases. Chapter 10. When vitality sags, try this health formula. Dr. Franklin Ebel of the University of Colorado Medical School maintains that 1/3 of all cases of illness in general hospitals are clearly organic in nature and onset, 1/3 are a combination of emotional and organic, and 1/3 are clearly emotional. Dr. Flanders Dunbar, author of Mind and Body, says it is not a question of whether an illness is physical or emotional, but how much of each. Every thoughtful person who has ever considered the matter realizes that the doctors are right when they tell us that resentment, hate, grudges, ill will, jealousy, vindictiveness are attitudes which produce ill health. Have a fit of anger and experience for yourself that sinking feeling in your stomach. Chemical reactions in the body are set up by emotional outbursts that result in feelings of ill health. Should these be continued either violently or in a simmering state over a period of time, the general condition of the body will deteriorate. In speaking of a certain man whom we both knew, a physician told me that the patient died of pharyngitis. The physician actually felt that the deceased passed away because of a long-held hatred. He did his body such damage that his resistance was lowered, the doctor explained, so that when a physical malady attacked him, he did not possess the stamina or renewing force to overcome it. He had undermined himself physically by the malignancy of his ill will. If you are under par, honestly ask yourself if you are harboring any ill will or resentment or grudges, and if so, cast them out without delay. They do no harm to the person against whom you hold these feelings, but every day and every night of your life they are eating at you. Many people suffer poor health not because of what they eat but from what is eating them. Emotional ills turn your body against itself, sapping your energy, reducing your efficiency, causing deterioration in your health. And of course they siphon off your happiness. And yet people still think that when the Bible tells you not to hate or to get angry that it is theoretical advice. The Bible is not theoretical. It is our greatest book of wisdom. It is filled with practical advice on living and on health. Anger, resentment, and guilt make you sick. Modern physicians tell us, which proves once again that the most up-to-date book on personal well-being is the Holy Bible, neglected by so many or regarded by them as purely a religious book and certainly as one that is not practical. No wonder more copies are read than all other books. That is because in this book, we discover not only what is wrong with us but how to correct it as well. Since irritation, anger, hate and resentment has such a powerful effect in producing ill health, what is the antidote? Obviously, it is to fill the mind with attitudes of goodwill, forgiveness, faith, love and the spirit of imperturbability. And how is that accomplished? Following are some practical suggestions. They have been used successfully by many in counterattacking especially the emotion of anger. A consistent application of these suggestions can produce feelings of well-being. 1. Remember that anger is an emotion, and an emotion is always warm, even hot. Therefore, to reduce an emotion, cool it. And how do you cool it? When a person gets angry, the fists tend to clench, the voice rises in stridency, muscles tense, the body becomes rigid. Psychologically, you are poised for fight. Adrenaline shoots through the body. This is the old caveman hangover in the nervous system. So deliberately oppose the heat of this emotion with coolness. Freeze it out. Deliberately, by an act of will, keep your hands from clenching. Hold your fingers out straight. Deliberately reduce your tone. Bring it down to a whisper. Remember that it is difficult to argue in a whisper. Slump in a chair or even lie down if possible. It is difficult to get mad lying down. 2. Anger expresses the accumulated vehemence of a multitude of minor irritations. These irritations, each rather small in itself, having gathered force by reason of the one being added to the other, finally blaze forth in a fury that often leaves us abashed at ourselves. Therefore, make a list of everything that irritates you. No matter how inconsequential it may be or how silly each is, list it just the same. This will dry up the tiny rivulets that feed the great river of anger. 3. Every time you feel anger, say, "It isn't worth it to spend $1,000 worth of emotion on a 5-cent irritation." 4. When a hurt-feeling situation arises, get it straightened out as quickly as possible. Go to someone you trust and pour it out to him until not a vestige of it remains within you. Then forget it. 5. Pray for the person who has hurt your feelings. Continue this until you feel the malice fading away. Sometimes you may have to pray for quite a while to get that result. A man who tried this method told me that he kept account of the times he needed to pray until the grievance left and peace came. It was exactly 64 times. He literally prayed it out of his system. This is positively guaranteed to work. Chapter 11. How to get people to like you. We might as well admit it. We want people to like us. If someone says, "I don't care whether people like me or not," he is not telling the truth. A poll was taken among some high school students on the question, "What do you most desire?" By overwhelming majority, the students voted that they wanted to be popular. The same urge is in older people. I must warn you that you will never get everybody to like you. There is a quirk in human nature whereby some people won't like you. It may be due to lack of rapprochement, that baffling mechanism by which we either do or do not click with certain people. Even if you are a difficult person or by nature shy and retiring, even unsocial, you can attain popularity by practicing a few simple, natural and easily mastered techniques. First, become a comfortable person, one who is easygoing and pleasant. Christianity teaches that one basic trait will go far toward getting people to like you. That trait is a sincere and forthright interest in and love for people. Perhaps if you cultivate this basic trait, other traits will naturally develop. If you are a comfortable person, do not assume that the reason other people do not like you is because of something wrong with them. Assume, instead, that the trouble is within yourself and determine to find and eliminate it. A man came to our New York clinic seeking help in personal relationships. About 35 years of age, he was splendidly proportioned and impressive. It was surprising that people would not like him. But he outlined an unhappy set of circumstances to illustrate his dismal failure in human relations. "I do my best," he explained. "I have tried to put into practice the rules I have been taught about getting along, but people just don't like me." After talking with him, it was not difficult to understand the trouble. There was about him a noticeable attitude of superiority. He was rigid, self-centered, and egotistical. This young man was irritable with people, and he picked on them in his own mind, though no outward conflicts with other persons developed. Inwardly, he was trying to make everybody over to suit himself. Unconsciously, people realized this. Barriers were erected in their minds toward him. Since he was being unpleasant to people in his thoughts, it followed that he was less than warm in his personal attitudes. He was suffering from self-love, a chief cure for which is the practice of love for others. He was bewildered and baffled when we outlined his difficulty. But he was sincere and practiced the suggested techniques for developing love of others. It required some fundamental changes, but he succeeded. One method suggested was that at night before retiring, he was to picture mentally each person he had met during the day. As he brought each face up before him, he was to think a kindly thought about that person. Then he was to pray for each one. The first person outside the family whom this man saw in the morning was the elevator man in his apartment house. He had not been in the habit of saying anything to him beyond good morning. Now he took the time to chat with the elevator man. He asked him about his family and his interests. He actually began to like the elevator operator and in turn the elevator man, who had formed a pretty accurate opinion of the young man, began to revise his views. They established a friendly relationship. So the process went from person to person. One day the young man said to me, "I have found that the world is filled with interesting people and I never realized it before." When he made that observation, he proved that he was losing himself. And when he did that, as the Bible so wisely tells us, he found himself. In losing himself, he found himself and lots of new friends besides. People learned to like him. Learning to pray for people was important in his rehabilitation. For when you pray for anyone, you tend to modify your personal attitude toward him. You lift the relationship to a higher level. The best in the other person begins to flow out toward you as your best flows toward him. In the meeting of the best in each, a higher unity of understanding is established. Granted, some people are by nature more likable than others. Nevertheless, a serious attempt to know any individual will reveal qualities within him that are admirable, even lovable. A man had the problem of conquering feelings of irritation toward persons with whom he associated. For some people he had a profound dislike. They irritated him intensely, but he conquered these feelings by making an exhaustive list of everything he could possibly admire about each person who annoyed him. Daily he attempted to add to this list. he was surprised to discover that people whom he thought he did not like proved to have many pleasing qualities. In fact, he was at a loss to understand how he ever disliked them. Of course, while he was making these discoveries about them, they, in turn, were finding likable qualities in him. Another factor in getting people to like you is to practice building up the ego of other persons. Whomever you help to build up and become a better, stronger, finer person will give you his undying devotion. Build up as many people as you can. Do it unselfishly. Do it because you like them and because you see possibilities in them. Do this and you will never lack for friends. You will always be well thought of. Build people up and love them genuinely. Do them good, and their esteem and affection will flow back toward you. Chapter 12. Prescription for Heartache. Please give me a prescription for heartache. This curious request was made by a man who had been informed by his doctor that his feelings of disability were not of a physical nature. His trouble lay in an inability to rise above sorrow. He was suffering from an ache in his personality as a result of grief. His doctor advised him to secure spiritual consultation and treatment. So, continuing to use the terminology of medicine, he repeated his question. Is there a spiritual prescription which will reduce my constant inner suffering? I realize that sorrow comes to everyone and I should be able to meet it the same as others. I have tried my best, but I find no peace. Again he said with a sad, slow smile, give me a prescription for heartache. There is indeed a prescription for heartache. One element in the prescription is physical activity. The sufferer must avoid the temptation to sit and brood. A sensible program which substitutes physical activity for such fruitless brooding reduces the strain on the area of the mind where we reflect, philosophize, and suffer mental pain. Muscular activity utilizes another part of the brain and therefore shifts the strain and gives relief. Whatever the character of your heartache, one of the first steps is to resolve to get back into the mainstream of life's activities. Take up your old associations. Form new ones. Get busy walking, riding, swimming, playing. Get the blood to coursing through your system. Lose yourself in some worthwhile project. Fill your days with creative activity and emphasize the physical aspect of activity. Employ healthy mind-relieving busyness, but be sure that it is of a worthwhile and constructive nature. Superficial escapism through feverish activity, as for example, parties and drinking, merely deadens pain temporarily and does not heal. An excellent and normal release from heartache is to give way to grief. It is natural to cry when pain or sorrow comes. This is a relief mechanism provided in the body by Almighty God and should be used. A good cry is a release from heartache. I should warn, however, that this mechanism should not be used unduly nor allowed to become habitual. Should that happen, it partakes of the nature of abnormal grief and could become a psychosis. I receive many letters from people whose loved ones have died. They tell me that it is difficult for them to go to the same places they were in the habit of frequenting together, or to be with the same people with whom they associated as a couple or as a family. Therefore, they avoid the old-time places and friends. I regard this as a serious mistake. A secret of curing heartache is to be as normal and natural as possible. This does not imply disloyalty or indifference. This policy is important in avoiding a state of abnormal grief. Normal sorrow is a natural process, and its normality is evidenced by the ability of the individual to return to his usual pursuits and responsibilities and continue therein as formerly. The deeper remedy for heartache, of course, is the curative comfort supplied by trust in God. Inevitably, the basic prescription for heartache is to turn to God in an attitude of faith and empty the mind and heart to Him. Perseverance in the act of spiritual self-emptying will finally bring healing to the broken heart. Another profoundly curative element in the prescription for heartache is to gain a sound and satisfying philosophy of life and death and deathlessness. For my part, when I gained the unshakable belief that there is no death, that all life is indivisible, that the here and hereafter are one, that time and eternity are inseparable, that this is one unobstructed universe, then I found the most satisfying and convincing philosophy of my entire life. This philosophy will not ward off the sorrow which comes when a loved one dies and physical, earthly separation ensues, but it will lift and dissipate grief. It will fill your mind with a deep understanding of the meaning of this inevitable circumstance, and it will give you a deep assurance that you have not lost your loved one. Live on this faith and you will be at peace, and the ache will leave your heart. Mr. H.B. Clarke, an old friend of mine, was for many years a construction engineer, his work taking him into all parts of the world. He was of a scientific turn of mind, a quite restrained, factual, unemotional type of man. I was called one night by his physician, who said that he did not expect him to live but a few hours. His heart action was slow and the blood pressure was extraordinarily low. There was no reflex action at all. The doctor gave no hope. I began to pray for him, as did others. The next day his eyes opened and after a few days he recovered his speech. His heart action and blood pressure returned to normal. After he recovered strength, he said, "At some time during my illness something peculiar happened to me. I cannot explain it. It seemed that I was a long distance away. I was in the most beautiful and attractive place I have ever seen. There were lights all about me, beautiful lights. I saw faces dimly revealed, kind faces they were, and I felt peaceful and happy. In fact, I have never felt happier in my life." Then the thought came to me, I must be dying. Then it occurred to me, perhaps I have died. Then I almost laughed out loud and asked myself, why have I been afraid of death all my life? There is nothing to be afraid of in this. Hallucination, a dream, a vision? I do not believe so. I have spent too many years talking to people who have come to the edge of something and had a look across, who unanimously have reported beauty, light and peace, to have any doubt in my own mind. Read and believe the Bible as it tells about the goodness of God and the immortality of the soul. Make prayer and faith the habit of your life. Learn to have real fellowship with God and with Jesus Christ. As you do this, you will find a deep conviction welling up in your mind that these wonderful things are true indeed. So in this faith, which is a sound, substantial and rational view of life and eternity, you have the prescription for heartache. Chapter 13. How to draw upon that higher power. When quite young, I was called to a large church in a university community, and many of my congregation were professors in the university, as well as leading citizens of the city. I wanted to justify the confidence of those who gave me such an outstanding opportunity and accordingly worked hard. As a result, I began to get rather tired and nervous and had no feeling of normal power. One day I decided to call on Professor Hugh M. Tillerow, a great friend of mine. He was a wonderful teacher, also a great fisherman and hiker. He was a man's man, an outdoor personality. I knew that if I did not find him at the university, he would be out on the lake fishing, and sure enough, there he was. He came ashore at my hail. "The fish are biting. Come on," he said. I climbed in his boat and we fished a while. "What's the matter, son?" he asked with understanding. I told him how hard I was trying and that it was getting me down nervously. "I have no feeling of lift or power," I said. He chuckled. "Maybe you're trying too hard." As the boat scraped the shore, he said, "Come in the house with me." As we entered his cabin, he ordered, "Lie down there on that couch. I want to read you something. Shut your eyes and relax while I find the quotation." I did as directed and thought he was going to read me some philosophical or perhaps diverting piece. But instead he said, "Here it is. Listen quietly while I read it to you, and let these words sink in. Hast thou not known? Hast thou not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, creator of the ends of the earth, faint not, neither is he weary. There is no searching of his understanding. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increase strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint." Isaiah 40:28-31. Then he asked, "Do you know from what I am reading?" "Yes, the 40th chapter of Isaiah," I answered. "I'm glad you know your Bible," he commented. "Why don't you practice it?" Now relax. Take 3 deep breaths, in and out slowly. Practice resting yourself in God. Practice depending upon Him for His support and power. Believe He is giving it to you now, and don't get out of touch with that power. Yield yourself to it. Let it flow through you. Give your job all you've got. Of course, you must do that. But do it in a relaxed and easy manner, like a batter in a big league ball game. He swings the bat easy-like and doesn't try to knock the ball out of the park. He just does the best he can and believes in himself because he knows that he has lots of reserve power. Then he repeated the passage again. "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength." That was a long time ago, but I never forgot that lesson. He taught me how to draw upon that higher power, and believe me, his suggestions worked. I continue to follow my friend's advice, and it has never failed me. My life is crowded with activity, but that power formula gives me all the strength I need. A second method for drawing upon that higher power is to learn to take a positive, optimistic attitude toward every problem. In direct proportion to the intensity of the faith which you muster will you receive power to meet your situation. According to your faith be it unto you. Matthew 9:29 is a basic law of successful living. There is a higher power, and the power can do everything for you. Draw upon it and experience its great helpfulness. Why be defeated when you are free to draw upon that higher power? State your problem. Ask for a specific answer. Believe that you are getting that answer. Believe that now, through God's help, you are gaining power over your difficulty. This higher power is constantly available. If you are open to it, it will rush in like a mighty tide. It is there for anybody under any circumstances or in any condition. This tremendous inflow of power is of such force that in its inrush it drives everything before it, casting out fear, hate, sickness, weakness, moral defeat, scattering them as though they had never touched you, refreshing and re-strengthening your life with health, happiness, and goodness. Why not draw upon that higher power?